Ever wondered how trailblazing risk leaders navigate uncertainty with finesse and confidence? Uncover the surprising connections between their personal journey and professional prowess, and get ready to learn and elevate your risk management game with the RiskMasters podcast. Join host Julien Haye in collaboration with Risk.net as they delve into hidden gems of risk leadership through engaging conversations and thought-provoking insights from board directors to chief risk officers and business leaders.
Welcome to the latest episode of RiskMasters with Anna Rosenberg, the Head of Geopolitics at Amundi Asset Management. Today, Anna shares her extensive journey from her early days as an historian to becoming a prominent figure in geopolitical risk analysis. She offers valuable insights on navigating geopolitical risks, the impact of gender on leadership, and the importance of a structured and analytical approach to risk management. In today's episode, you will learn more about 1. Resilience and career growth, 2. Gender and leadership, 3. Strategic geopolitical risk management. You can find more information on my website, avtm.com, including the recap article and the notes of today's episode, as well as tons of thought leadership articles on risk management. Now more about Anna Rosenberg. Anna is the Head of Geopolitics at Amundi Asset Management, one of Europe's largest asset managers. With her background in history and extensive experience in political risk analysis, she helps investors navigate and predict political risk through research data and structured strategies. Her analytical approach and commitment to continuous learning really define her leadership style. For background, this interview was recorded at the Live Risk Conference in London in June 2024, and now without further ado, I give you Anna. Anna, welcome. It's my pleasure to welcome Anna Rosenberg today. Would you like to give you a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure. My name is Anna Rosenberg. I'm Head of Geopolitics at Amundi Asset Management, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. And today we have the pleasure to be at a Risk Live conference in London. In fact, today we are going to talk a little bit about geopolitical risk, which is what you talked about in the panel just before. But before we get there, I'd like to build a little bit about your personal background. I think you and I have known each other for quite a few years now in a different setting. But I'm sure that the people who are listening to the podcast today would like to know how you actually ended up being Head of Geopolitical Risk at Amundi Asset Management.
We could do a whole podcast just on that. So I'm a historian by training. I've traveled quite a bit around the world. I've learned different languages. I've always been very curious about the world. I've always loved to analyze things. And I came onto the job market during the financial crisis, and I spent many years really trying to figure out what I wanted to do with myself. And I always came back to the conclusion that I like to analyze things. And so I started off by really also because of my studies focusing on political risk in sub-Saharan Africa. Then we had Trump in the US, we had Brexit in the UK, and suddenly I saw a lot of the companies that I was working with struggling with kind of similar levels of risk in some of their biggest markets. So I pivoted to really help organizations manage risks in Europe. I co-founded a business at the time, and subsequently Risk gone global, and I was headhunted away from my consultancy at that point to become the head of geopolitics for Europe's largest asset managers. So it's been a trajectory, and I think you can see the state of the world based on my career.
Yeah, and I think we will come back to that, to something you talked about in the panel before, around making sure we don't talk about opinion, but actually having a structured approach to geopolitical risk. Which I think you already started hinting to in terms of being analytical and structured in the way you approach it. Before we get there, what was the hardest challenge you had to face in your career?
I think I alluded to it already. The hardest challenge was really being thrown onto the job market during the financial crisis. And I remembered writing applications after applications and getting declines after declines. And when you're in university and you think the world is waiting for you, and you realize that actually no one is waiting for you. That was a tough time, and it took me some time also because I've studied something rather exotic, which was African Asian history, right? So it was not just because of the job market; it was also because of my university choices. Nevertheless, I think up to this date was one of the best experiences because I do value what I have. I know what it took me to get here. And as a result, I'm not complacent.
And I think it's a very important thing to think about for people who are actually entering the job market now. And we might come back to that in a later part of the interview as well. You and I were talking about the gender aspect just before we started the interview. How did your gender impact your career, if anything at all?
It's a good question, and one that, as I said to you before, I have not really thought about very much. So I thought about it for this interview. I really never thought much about my gender until I remember this moment in university where for the first time I thought, oh, we're actually not equal. I always thought we had already gender equality. And that was a real pivotal moment. It was kind of, I woke up from some kind of level of being naive. But subsequently, I know that there were some jobs that probably passed me by because I was not male at that time. But generally, I think I see my gender as something that has given me superpowers. Simply being able to operate on full capacity and do big presentations to a room full of executives without having slept at all because you have a 7-month-old baby at home, that is a superpower. And that superpower I have until this day. So I know now I can do anything because I can do that. So here it clearly has affected me in a positive way. I would say, of course, there is a cost to especially being a mother. It is less gender specific. It's actually about being a parent as well. And I'm keen to hear on your experiences because clearly after the 2 times that I had maternity leaves, there has been a knock on the career. Without doubt, you have a cost on, you lose out on bonuses, you lose out on promotions. The consequence that I took from that is that you have to move on. But ultimately, the power that I've gotten from being a mother totally, outdoes that in the sense of, as I said, this feeling that you have a superpower, you become simply much more efficient, you have an additional level of purpose in your life that you didn't have before, and vice versa, my job gives me a purpose. But I have to say that apart from that, I have never really seen my gender as something that has held me back. So I see it as a power.
Well, we could spend a lot of time actually talking about that, I think, as an entire topic. For me, it's gender equality is extremely important.
Yes.
And one of the things I see as a key impediment to that is the lack of parental leave equalization. Change that, you're going to start shifting a lot of the dynamic. And I was thrilled to see that in the UK, for instance, there's been a change in law recently where the rights become transferable if something happens to the mother in childbirth, which was a point we flagged many years back in previous company because by law and by policy that was not the case, for example. Mm-hmm. It's just one step, but you need to have far more to have proper gender equality, I think, in a workplace.
Absolutely. On the flip side, I would also say that, of course, I travel quite a lot for my job. It's a big job, right? I'm speaking in front of lots of people, and sometimes I miss sports day. I miss next week's. I will miss sports day because I'm going to be in Paris, and that is hard sometimes, of course. But my husband then says to me, Anna, your daughters have the best they can possibly have, which is an independent mother that's gone her own way, and that's the best example that you can set. And that is a thought that also comforts me, despite missing sports day.
I think we all have the same issues as parents, right? So, it's a tough one. Shall we dive a little bit back into geopolitical risk? And I think I'd like to go into one that connects straight away to the discussion you guys were having on the panel just before on geopolitical aspect. What are the key elements that organizations should focus on to build a more strategic and embedded resilience from a geopolitical standpoint?
Sure. So I would say that we are in a world where the geopolitical risk is just quite likely going to grow, right? We discussed it during the panel. There are a lot of drivers that point to that. It is, it's about, we have more countries involved driving higher levels of risk. We see more protectionism, more tariffs, more trade wars, more export controls, more sanctions. And when you look at history, whenever we are in this kind of period of economic fragmentation, the risk of hot wars go up. Then we have the fact that the US-China relationship is on a path of decline under any US administration. You add on top of this the risks from artificial intelligence on political misinformation and polarization, as well as the risks from climate change. So, I usually do not like to make predictions that go beyond the 1-year time horizon. But the trends are so clear in this case that I think it's quite fair to say that we are likely going to see geopolitical rise for the remainder of this decade. And this is a very important fact to acknowledge, because organizations will only start to build what they need to build if they know that this is going to stick around for a while. And it's not just, a volatility issue that comes and goes all the time. So from my experience, there are different ways of how organizations need to deal with risks. In my current role, I advise investors that manage portfolios. So it's about financial opportunities and risks. It's portfolio management, which is a very different thing as to how organizations should deal with risks. But I used to, in my previous capacities, advise companies on expanding in some of the most volatile markets in the world. And frankly, if I start with this, it was always the same thing, the companies that were successful versus the one that were unsuccessful. The companies that were successful spent time to dive deep. They did the work. They did the risk analysis. They kept on top of developments, of trends. They monitored very closely developments on the ground. They had scenarios. They had teams that were just busy doing scenario planning, right, and pest analyses, et cetera, And those were the ones that had a clear strategy in place that was thought through. They doubled down when everyone else was pulling out because their strategy was, our analysis points to things are going to smooth out and then we're going to capture market share because everyone else is gone. That strategy has always worked. So in sum, if you want to be ahead of the competitors, you need to do the homework. You need to work really hard, like in everything in life. So that's the framework we need to think about as an organization. When it's about managing risk within a portfolio or within an asset manager or in a financial organization, you have to do different things because it's about the markets. The market moves fast, so you need to stay on top of it much more than from a strategic perspective. Here it's about filtering the noise from what actually matters. It's about developing scenarios and likelihoods. It's about using risk as a lens to spot opportunity as well. And it's about baking the risks into the forecasts. So you need, in sum, it's about having frameworks and a strategy.
You, in a panel, you guys mentioned about, and you mentioned about moving away from pure opinion and noise to exactly what you just said around actually filtering out the facts and what matters to what you try to describe. I think the other thing you just touched on as well is a question of time horizon of decision making as well. It seems that based on what you just said, from a financial market standpoint, it's short-term time horizon in a way versus medium to long-term time horizon when it comes to strategic decision from an organizational standpoint. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, although there is both a short-term dimension and a longer-term dimension to markets as well. So clearly, yes, I get quite annoyed when people share their opinions on geopolitics because I am an analyst. I never share my opinions. If I would share my opinions, I would be very passionate about it. I don't like this politician, I like that politician. But that's not my job. My job is about a cold, objective analysis, despite all the tragedy that may be involved in a conflict, to tell people what is the most likely outcome of an event. It's about building decision trees with percentage outcomes because most paths lead into one direction. So let's look at the long versus short term. So for an organization, it's clearly about thinking strategically how to set themselves up to a new geopolitical reality. In a way, it's, I'm joking, in a way it's similar to what we have done with the ESG criteria. When you have ESG ratings of companies, you should have geopolitical ratings for companies. Which company has really thought through about where they sit on the geopolitical spectrum? Are they at risk or are they one of the opportunities? For markets, there are these two dynamics. The long-term trends the geopolitical trends are already playing out in the markets. For example, gold prices. They're high because many governments are diversifying their dollar holdings right now away from dollar, right, towards gold. The tech rally, it's not just about AI. It's also about the US-China competition. So here you see long-term trends already playing out in the markets. Yes, the markets is a lot about short-term issues. Portfolio managers watch short-term developments very, very closely all the time. But geopolitics is also already shaping the backdrop of the macro backdrop. We've had a delay in cutting interest rates this year. Clearly, geopolitical drivers were partly to blame for that. Disruptions in the Red Sea, right? Concerns over all geopolitical drivers being pretty expensive, meaning inflation doesn't come down as quickly. So in sum, we have, you do need a long-term and a short-term lens to dealing with it.
And I'd like to build on that, and you've already covered quite a number of points in one go. Where do you see the relationship between global trade dynamics and political stability? And you already touched on tariffs, for example, but can you elaborate a little bit more on that and the impact you see there?
Yes. So we have been, there's quite an interesting chart that I will share with you, but I can describe here, that shows that shows the kind of economic friction occurring during the First and Second World War. And for the first time in the last 100 years, we're once again seeing a blip in economic integration. I've always said we're not living in a deglobalized world. We are still very much in a globalized world. It's just that things are moving different routes. So there's a rerouting going on. Nevertheless, we are having politicians impose a lot of sanctions, of export controls, and that will go up and will grow. More, if we have a change in the US administration with the Trump presidency, we're going to see trade tariffs being used much more holistically than under the current Biden administration. He's already using it, but not as much as we expect the Trump administration to use it. Because the US trade deficit is a big issue for Trump. So he will likely start to impose tariffs on any country that the US has a trade deficit with, and any country that doesn't have an attractive bargaining chip. Yeah? Europe is probably going to be hit here, because there are quite a few countries in Asia that have a large trade deficit with the US, but they can probably bargain around being allies with the US and not China with Trump. So in sum, we're seeing more protectionism, more defense spending coming up, and that does not bode very well for political stability, unfortunately.
You've already explored quite a lot of that, but what companies and organizations can do in preparation of all the economic and actually political shifts that you just described?
It's the same thing. It's about being smart about it, really having people that follow it, understand what it means. There's so much noise out there right now. And it's so hard to differentiate between what matters and what doesn't matter. You do need analysts who can do that, to tell you when something really is important, to tell you what the consequences will be of electric vehicle tariffs on, coming in from China on the EU. Which sectors are the most likely going to be impacted? Are you maybe going to be in the crosshairs? You need someone to outline that. You need someone to outline what the consequence could be from a European Parliament that has a bigger far-right representation, so that you know as a company what to do about it. So frankly, I think it's about, again, monitoring things closely, predicting things, having scenarios, and develop responses to these.
And I think it builds a little bit on one of the poll questions during your panel discussion, where people seem to be in a room mostly in a reactive mode rather than being in a proactive and systematic ways of identifying and managing in response to these shifts.
Yes, which is quite funny in a sense, because I think we're already seeing this change, and you've seen that we're already, I think, 20% or so of people that had capabilities in place to monitor it. And I can again go back to comparing this to my career, to what I saw, what companies, some of the biggest companies, right, Coca-Cola, Dell, L'Oreal, were doing in sub-Saharan Africa compared to what executives, how shocked they were with the political risks in the UK after the Brexit vote. So in sub-Saharan Africa, they had teams in place. They know risk is a thing you do all the time. You need to know, you need to be prepared, you need to have your teams in place. They knew what they had to do when there was a currency crisis. They knew what they had to do when there was a congestion at the port, when they couldn't get their goods out. They knew when there was sudden huge inflation. They knew how they had to adjust their prices. They knew. And when we saw Brexit hit the UK, executives, of similar kind of organizations did not know how to deal with sudden impact on their labor force, on goods being stuck in the port. They did not know. Why? Because they didn't have the need before to deal with these risks. But we are in a different world now, so I think we're on the cusp of organizations starting to build the kind of capabilities I saw in sub-Saharan Africa because of the direction of travel. Now there are more and more geopolitical analysts like me in asset managers, in hedge funds, in organizations. You saw the remit of what previously used to be called public affairs people in companies, which actually used to be about lobbying. Their remit has expanded. They now do a different type of job. So in essence, I think we are moving to a world where companies will have to have more holistic risk capabilities.
And that's as a result of more and more instability and changing landscape across the world. And that's not going to go away anytime soon based on what we are seeing. So with that, thank you so much. I think we're going to move slightly toward the close. And I think you've already touched on quite a few things, but could you give one piece of advice to organizations looking to strengthen their resilience in that context? If you have anything else to add you haven't covered already, but you already said get prepared effectively. So
get prepared and get people with a different point of view, with a different point of mindset. Curious people, maybe from different fields that you wouldn't really think about. Because the most important thing about this world that we move into is to be open-minded, think out of the box, and be flexible and agile. So that would be my recommendation.
And I might actually add one advice to anyone listening. If you think something is not going to happen, then think twice. Get prepared for it. And in a way, you've already answered the last question by your career path, but I'd like to hear a little bit more. Any final advice for any emerging risk leaders who actually would like either to expand their career or actually enter the world of risk?
Yes, firstly, you have to work really hard. It's about being persistent. Don't let setbacks set you back. Someone told me once, and I think this was the best career advice I got, do what you love and then figure out how to make money with it later. And frankly, it has worked quite well so far. The other thing I would say is expand your horizon. Be humble. Know that you don't know much and learn. And learn and be open and listen. And speak to as many people as you possibly can about their career paths and also what they did not expect. Because we always hear the stories we want to hear, but we don't necessarily prepare for what we did not expect. And some career paths may limit you in a way that you do not know until you find out, and you may want to know that earlier.
Well, Anna, thank you so much for your time today. It was a treat to have you here with us. And I hope we can catch up again soon at some point, perhaps in 6 months or a year time to see where the world is. Thank you so much for your time today.
It was a pleasure.
As I wrap up this conversation with Anna Rosenberg, her insight into navigating geopolitical risks, embracing gender dynamics in leadership, and the importance of structured analysis really have left me deeply inspired. Anna's journey, marked by her dedication to continuous learning and strategic risk management, really underscores the power of persistence, analytical thinking, and the courage to approach challenges head-on. So a heartfelt thank you to Anna for sharing her invaluable experiences and wisdom with us on RiskMasters today. Her story reminds us and reminds me that diligence, diversity, and strategic thinking are really essential ingredients for mastering risk and achieving success. So to dive deeper in today's episodes and access show notes, transcript, and more, please visit my website avtm.com. And remember, keep pushing boundaries, keep making an impact, and never shy away from becoming the master of your destiny. Until the next time.
Thank you for joining us on RiskMasters today. If you're ready to master risk and unleash your full potential, here's how you can take the next steps. First, head over to julienhaye.com to discover even more valuable insights from our RiskMasters. We've got a treasure trove of knowledge waiting for you. Second, don't miss out on future episodes. Hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcasting platform. Stay tuned for fascinating discussions on risk management. And third, if you found today's episode valuable, please share it on social media. Help others discover the world of RiskMasters and embark on their journey of risk mastery. Remember, success favors the bold. See you on the next episode of RiskMasters.